Why is Donald Trump acting the way he is when a reporter dares to ask a question? Explain to me what's in it for Donald Trump, who generally doesn't like keeping secrets, to do that. Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast. Mark, I am not buying what the feds are selling when it comes to the Epstein files. And I just want to give you one quote, and this is from the DOJ memo, and it is as simple as this: no further disclosures would be appropriate or warranted. What that doesn't mean something doesn't exist. That's an odd way of saying something doesn't exist, i.e., a list or something like a list.
When you say, by the way, hi Harvey. You
Hi,
didn't
Mark.
even greet me or anything else.
Well, we talk all week.
I know.
Well, when you return my calls.
When you say that something is not appropriate, it almost sounds like a parent scolding a child and saying you're not acting appropriate, right? It doesn't really give you any confidence. And poor Pam Bondi, who I really like a lot, is out there.
She bungled this.
She's getting crucified because she's out there, and there are videos of her saying there's, hundreds, if not thousands, and things of that nature. Let me tell you, there's a couple of things that are very, very troubling. You remember they first said there was a snafu at the time they released the first tranche. They had, if you might remember, they invited some, for lack of a better term, influencers to the White House. They gave them binders, and then they were told there was a snafu. And what was represented is that Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, had figured out that the SDNY, Southern District of New York, had a whole lot of stuff that had not been turned over, and that became a deal. And Pam, to her credit, was upfront with that and transparent and said, I'm going through it and we're working through it and we're going to get it out here and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden it became, it's not appropriate. Now, let me give you some facts, Harvey, that are why, and I normally would not be going down this rabbit hole, but we know for a fact that Epstein is dead, or presumably, although I've seen the memes.
Yeah, right. There's one conspiracy theory that he's not.
Yes, right. So they're not protecting his trial rights, so to speak, to release anything. We know, for instance, and I could understand that, and by the way, I think Pam Bondi said this, if there are tapes or if there are videos that they don't want to show children, and they don't want to show people who are classified as victims without notifying them. Completely understandable.
But by the way, there apparently are videos.
Correct. And by the way,
a lot of them.
By the way, no less than Alan Dershowitz has cut a video that he posted on one of his media platforms. And Alan is under a court order, a protective order. And Alan is not allowed, as part of, mind you, remember, he was falsely accused originally of having, and he had defended Epstein. And he is adamant that there are things that the government has, and he's precluded from revealing it.
I know for a fact documents are being suppressed, and they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them, but I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them, and that's wrong.
Now, why, after a multi-year fight, and well before he settled this, I talked to Alan about this when he was first being falsely accused as being, a participant in this. And I remember how agitated he was. And I talked to him repeatedly, and he wanted to punch David Boies in the face. And I remember at the time that he was being, he basically was inviting anybody to call bullshit on him. And he's now, they settled, they dismissed. There was a statement by, and I always can never pronounce her name, Virginia Giuffre, I think is the pronunciation.
Right.
Who, by the way, coincidentally, is where now, Harvey?
She died.
Yeah.
She committed.
So,
I believe
Epstein-
she took her life.
Yes. Okay, so we got that. Epstein supposedly took his life. By the way, who was the attorney general when Epstein took his life? Bill Barr.
Yep.
Who hired Epstein at his first job at the Tony Upper East Side School where Epstein first taught young ladies? Do you know?
No.
Bill Barr's dad was the headmaster of that school. Where did tape disappear from the MDC to the point where two officers, MDC people, were hung out to dry in the case, and then their case became a deferred entry later on after everything. Remember tape, the video wasn't working? Do you remember that?
Right, but now this is the same tape that's just surfaced again, right?
Yeah. You believe the authenticity of that?
No, because Wired came out today and said this thing apparently was in some way spliced, and there is a minute missing from 11:59 to midnight. There is a minute in this tape missing. I don't have. Look, can I just cut to the chase here?
Yes.
I know Pam Bondi went on Fox in February and essentially said she had a list on her desk, but she hadn't reviewed it, which makes no sense to me, Mark. Everybody, if you had a list on your desk of this and you were Attorney General, tell me, well, I just haven't gotten around to opening the file. If there was a list, you'd look at it. You'd glance at it. Come on. Just the curiosity
So do you
of it.
want my
Well, hold on. I want to make a point, though.
Okay.
Even if Pam Bondi is right, and I do want to get back to that, but even if she's right, there may not be a proper list, but Jeffrey Epstein was enmeshed in being around powerful people and having, something that he could leverage with powerful people. So there had to be names, not necessarily in a list, but in 100 documents or 300 documents where there's a name here and a name there and a name there. So to say there's not a list doesn't mean there aren't names in a file. And I'm not saying, oh, let's look at all the names, because there probably are a lot of innocent people. Look, what I'm told is that even though Donald Trump is on one of the logs, there's nothing beyond that. And which makes me curious why Donald Trump is so angry that people are still asking the questions. But there's got to be a bunch of names, probably many of which are just innocent names of people who were on a flight log or whatever. But why are they doing somersaults here? It smells. It smells.
Well, remember, I'm gonna make my point. Yes, it smells. I said in real time when he supposedly committed suicide, I said the fact that they didn't have the tape, the fact that supposedly people, at least the story was out there, because I've always suspected those poor people who were prosecuted and then had their case kind of made evaporate were probably scapegoats. But the fact that, and remember, Bill Barr, who was the attorney general at the time, was fit to be tied when this happened. He was so angry. I remember seeing it, and he was literally like one of those cartoons with smoke coming out of his ears. Yet it was his dad who knew and hired Jeffrey Epstein, in coincidence of all coincidences. I'm not implying anything. I'm just spitting out why there become conspiracy theories. So I did a little digging, and when I had not heard your use, what you just used, as appropriate, but it fits or dovetails with a theory. I've got both clients and close friends who are and have been enmeshed in the intelligence community. And when I say enmeshed, I'm talking decades, both at both CIA, FBI. I mean, I have, I think, pretty solid sources there. This is their working theory, that Epstein was not necessarily, I've seen the theories. He was a Mossad intelligence operative, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I've seen that. And I ran that by these guys. I've seen this, is this, I don't want to be part of these tropes that are out there or anything else. And they said, what makes the most sense of all of this, and why now they would have to clamp down, and why, Kash Patel and Don and Bongino and Pam are having to walk this back. And you have to say to yourself, what happened? What happened? There is how there are, when somebody is either a target, that's the language, a subject, or the just a person of interest, so to speak. There's gradients. There's also gradients with people who are informants. There are people who are an operative. An operative is kind of somebody who's actually employed that way. There's confidential informants, and then there's assets. And my people had tell me that their best speculation is that he was a very, very valuable asset. What do I mean by that? That when the various intelligence agencies needed information for whatever reason, for whatever kind of purpose, that he had that information, that he could get it from the highest levels. All you got to do is take a look at the circles he traveled in, and that it has all the earmarks of somebody who is a source. So when you say
a source, though, can I ask a source for, because I know that he was involved with some people who were in the Mossad. So is this Israeli centric? It sounds more like it's just a source for all of the various people that may come in and out of Justice Department investigations who have a lot of money that they might be interested in. That seems to be what you're saying.
Well, let me tell you that I have had cases, and I won't give names or identifying factors. I've had cases where I have seen where, I'll give you an example, one in particular. Secret Service, Israeli intelligence, and the FBI all collided, the left not knowing what the right was doing, and my client at the time being a source for all three agencies, and none of them knew that. And that they share these kinds of assets, if you will, and that stuff is so deep sixth that you're never going to release it, because it reveals sources, methods, and all kinds of information that would compromise
This
people.
feels like the J. Edgar Hoover files.
Well, I'm telling you, I know this happens. I'm like Dershowitz, who's talking specific. I'm talking 30,000-foot view. I know for a fact that there are people at the highest levels of the economic ladder who are sources or assets for the intelligence agencies. And there's no other rational, as crazy and tinfoil hat as that sounds, there is no rational explanation as for what's going on right now.
So, okay, I hear that part. What about the what? Huh?
But
no, there's there's no but. I'm wondering. It's like, why is this being protected the way it is? Is it just these are such powerful, rich people that might be in the file for various reasons that they want to just put the kibosh on it because Donald Trump may know some of them, Pam Bondi knows some of them? Here's why I'm confused. Dan Bongino may resign as we're talking right now. He got in a big fight with Pam Bondi in the White House on Wednesday. And he was there with Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and Susie Wiles. And they were talking about this. And it came up, this is according to Axios, and Axios does a great job. And according to Axios, there was a discussion about how Bongino believed Pam Bondi mishandled the whole matter, the way she went on Fox and then took it back and all of that stuff. She accused him of leaking to News Nation, and he stormed out of the White House. It didn't work well, didn't go to work today. This is Friday, and that he may not come back. So it looks like there's a huge break. Pam Bondi does what Donald Trump says she should do, and she is taking the position there's no list. The problem I have and why I'm so confused is that Dan Bongino, according to Axios, because I talked to the reporter today, that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel have done a complete 180, according to this reporter, a complete 180 because they were leading the conspiracy theory charge before they got appointed to the FBI. They were the ones saying that there was a list, that it was being hidden, that Epstein may have been murdered. Now they're saying the exact opposite. They believe there's no list. They don't believe he was murdered. They wanted to bring forward this videotape with a minute missing, but still say it was suicide and it proves it. And I don't understand the 180. What would cause them to suddenly drink that Kool-Aid and say, oh, everything we said before, which I clearly believed they believed, we don't believe anymore. It doesn't make sense to me.
Look, how well do you know Dan?
I don't.
Okay. I've appeared in the past with him. I've never questioned his passion. I mean, we could be diametrically opposed on many different issues, but I've never questioned his passion. And his passion on this subject before he got over there was almost bordering on over the top. And
right.
And I agree with you, he's done the 180. But play out for me a second. What would the argument be that they were having between him and Bondi? Who would be taking what position?
See, what I thought was, and look, and I talked to the Axios reporter.
That's why I'm asking.
Caputo, and he says it was about that Pam Bondi, that Bongino believed Pam Bondi just mishandled the way everything came out, that it could have come out so much smoother. And she then apparently accused him of leaking to News Nation. So, I get that. But if that's all it is, why would Bongino be threatening to quit? It just seems like it's
By
bigger.
the way, I was going to say, I don't buy that for a second. There's no way that a internecine battle over who leaked who. I mean, by the way, DC is like a sieve.
A sieve.
It's like a sieve, exactly. So there's no way that and I know these people, and I not great, but I know them, and I just don't buy that story. That story does not.
It didn't make sense to me. So something else happened in the Oval
Office.
But
does the reporter think that that's true?
He said he believed those were the two things, and he's a great reporter. He is a great listen. He's the one that found out there was a fight in the first place in the White House over this. He is a great reporter. I'm just having trouble. I'm having trouble with the whole notion that Bongino does a 180 this way, that he was so passionate that what I'm thinking, and I have no proof of it, is maybe Bongino still believes what he did believe, and the fight was over that, over you need to release more. And that didn't, and Trump wouldn't do it, Pam Bondi wouldn't do it, and he was upset. I have no evidence of that. It's just so hard for me to believe Kash Patel and Bongino would just suddenly say, oh, there's no list after all. Oh, nothing happened with Epstein. It's just hard to believe.
Well, Kash Patel is another one. I don't know Kash, but what a great resume to have somebody who's actually a jury trial lawyer. I mean, he tried cases in federal court. And as you know, I have great respect for that, because that's somebody who's done battle with the federal government and gets it. And I thought, what a great choice for whatever reasons to be there and to get into this, especially. And by the way, this is kind of a weird confluence, both on the left and the right. You know what I mean? In terms of the people who are kind of invested in this right now. And
I don't think Epstein made a distinction between the two. I think he was interested in
not at all.
Rich, powerful, famous people. and they come from both sides. And I think
And
that's one of the reasons you're seeing that, parts of both sides agree and parts of both sides take the other side. But it's not like a left-wing, right-wing thing.
And by the way, one of the things that's always perplexed me about him is going back to this. He's hired as a teacher at a Tony Upper East Side school, right? At a very young age, I want to say early 20s. How does that guy out of nowhere all of a sudden become this
Right.
whiz kid financier worth, close to $1 billion
Right.
with no, I don't want to say no visible means of support, but inexplicable financial footprints for anybody to figure out. I mean, the whole thing is a real conundrum. And I think the way to solve or at least get close to this, and I haven't talked to him, but I did see his post last night. Dershowitz should go in and ask to be relieved of this protective order. Now that Epstein's dead, now that Giuffre is dead, what in the world why should Alan Dershowitz, whose reputation, if you believe him, he couldn't even go out his door in Nantucket anymore, first world problems. And he was vilified, and that I know, because we know many people in comedy.
No, and he just
suffered quite a bit.
And he's spinning over it. So
yeah.
Why do you think he was privy to any of these documents?
Because remember, he defended Epstein. He also was litigating with Giuffre, who was represented by David Boies at the time. He was in a knockdown, drag-out litigation, and that resolved with Giuffre giving a kind of a not so much a mea culpa as an admission that she was probably wrong. And there was a protective order component that overlaid all of this, which I think he should be released from. And by the way, I don't understand why he's under it. And I haven't talked to him, and maybe he'll call me up tonight and tell me, or whenever this drops. But that would be the first place to start. The guy who was the lawyer for Epstein, who would know. I mean, think of all the people that are dead here. Ken Starr was one of his lawyers down in the Florida, dead. Allen's the last guy.
Well, this is like the Kennedy assassination, where people were dropping like flies afterward. Look, the federal government unleashed an army on Diddy. 70 Homeland Security agents. They tore through his homes. They seized videotapes. They seized documents. They have the ability to do this. How could it be that in the Epstein case, which was as high profile as you get, they unleash federal resources and the file is devoid of any of that stuff, any names? This is a man who kept journals on his life of power and rubbing elbows, and yet they're saying they're not even saying we got nothing. They're saying it wouldn't be appropriate to release it. They're as much as saying it exists. Why is Donald Trump acting the way he is when a reporter dares to ask a question about what Pam Bondi did with this file? Why would he go off the way he did on Wednesday? Explain to me what's in it for Donald Trump, who generally doesn't like keeping secrets, to do that.
So this is what's perplexing to me. When Epstein died and was in custody, he was facing federal criminal charges. He had been, they had indicted him. They kept it sealed. They, remember, famously arrested him as he landed on his own jet from Paris. So they had gone to a grand jury. They had a grand jury indictment. Behind that grand jury indictment was a lengthy investigation.
Right.
Right? Lengthy investigation. If you've ever done or been around a federal criminal prosecution, there is more material than you can even imagine. I used to joke that when I first started practicing, the discovery I would get would be something akin to a paper you could fold it over and make the file. Now, I remember 15 years ago, I did a case, where the co-defendant was the then #3 guy in the CIA. And in that case, I used to complain, we got 4 terabytes of discovery. And I used to think that's incomprehensible. Now you have 40 terabytes of data is standard operating procedure. Can you imagine what they must have had in Epstein's case?
That's
it
what
makes
I'm
no
saying.
sense.
That's what I'm saying. That to say they're not really saying it's devoid of names, but I think the problem is that people started getting obsessed over the word list, and it may not be a list, but it may be 100 pages that have a lot of information. And I think everybody's now to the point where they're, okay, if it's not a list, what is it? And they are just locked up tight as a drum. And I don't understand the motivation. What's Donald Trump's motivation in trying to shut down a reporter the way he did over this? What? I'm not going
to psychoanalyze or try
well, you
to
psychoanalyze everybody else.
I will psychoanalyze everybody else. I'm not going to try and psychoanalyze him.
You
say
represented the guy.
There is something going on between or behind the scenes, and put this against the backdrop of all of the COVID era kind of disclosures now, where don't look over here, that's misinformation. And it turns out it wasn't misinformation, it was actual reality. And I've never been a tinfoil hat guy, but now this is fodder. This is more than fodder. This is something that I think there's something there. And I wish I had told you in advance as I was thinking about this to have Alan's clip, because I want you to watch Alan's clip on this and see what he says. It's incredible. And Dershowitz has got there's no reason for him to talk about it in the forceful, passionate way that he does, unless he's frustrated by the fact that he knows what is being put out there is just patently untrue.
Can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
So when I was 16 years old, because I'm not a tinfoil hat guy either, I'm really not, but I do believe the government hides things. And we're naive to think that there are not all sorts of deals made and files locked. I believe that's the case with UFOs based on a lot of experience doing documentaries on them. So there are areas where I know the government does that. When I was 16 years old, John Kennedy had been assassinated for, I think, 2.5 years. And I read Rush to Judgment, which was a book written by a guy named Mark Lane, who became the leader in the conspiracy theory that John F. Kennedy was killed by more than one person, Lee Harvey Oswald. And I became so just fixated on this that I read every book. I read the entire...
Did you read or ever talk to Cyril Wecht, the late
Yes,
great,
of course.
Yeah, okay.
But I got to tell you, David Lifton, who was a big guy in the movement, I read the 26 volumes of the Warren Commission report. I got involved in the Jim Garrison prosecution of Clay Shaw. I would go to a phone booth and I would call collect to Jim Garrison from a Mr. Informant who has significant information. And he accepted my call. And there was something I saw in the Zapruder film that he was fascinated by. And he eventually, I ended up having to give him my home number. My mom answered. My mom went crazy that I'm talking to the DA when I'm 16 years. It was a whole thing. And so I am positive, based on a lot of reading and talking, there is no doubt John Kennedy was killed by more than one person. And yet, I see what the government has done over more than 60 years. They are hiding this. And I don't care what they're releasing. There is no doubt they have hidden what really happened to John F. Kennedy. And that's what shaped me. It shaped me. And it's not so much that I believe in every conspiracy theory, but I absolutely believe the government is capable of doing that in other areas. And I think they're doing it here. I think they're doing it here.
Well, like I said, when I get off here, I'm going to call Alan, Alan maybe will call as soon as he watches this, because I watched that and he put me over. I was on the fence, although when I talked to you yesterday, I'd been so intrigued by this, and then I watched him last night, and to watch the passion that he has, that he knows there's stuff there.
Why
and that
can't
he's
he
not
release it?
buying
What's
it.
the point of the gap? Why?
I don't understand, the old expression, when the reason for the rule fails, then the rule itself fails. That would seem to be the case right now.
Well, what was the reason?
I guess to protect, it's always to protect the legal definition of victims. I get that.
So this
But
was
you
in
know how he
discovery, and one
solved
of his
that?
was this
Yeah.
yeah.
I believe it was in discovery, and I'm telling you that nobody would know better than Alan what's going on here, because he had defended them. He probably had to take discovery under a protective order, because you can't do any federal criminal defense anymore unless you take stuff under a protective order. Everything's always here you go, you can have it, and then if you release it, God knows what's going to happen to you. And my guess is that he got discovery during his battle royale, trying to clear himself. And so that's, like I said, I haven't talked to him about it right now, post this release, but my best guess is he's got discovery that's under a protective order of some kind that he can't release, and he's frustrated. You could see the frustration. It was palpable on his post.
I will say this. I understand on the one hand why you would want to protect people where there's no evidence of anything untoward, because just the association is just so career ending. Just, it is so brutal. And it happened to Alan Dershowitz. So you could understand.
Absolutely.
Then you could understand if there are just names in passing where there's no evidence of anything, that you don't want to release that. But I wonder if there's anything distinguishing some names from other names. And if it really is that we found nothing untoward and there are 34 names, but we are not going to release them because we have good reason, because of what the impact it would have on their lives, at least that would say something. But they're saying it doesn't exist. Nothing exists. And I just don't believe it.
You could, by the way, instead of saying it's not appropriate, add a couple of sentences.
Right.
It's not appropriate because this would expose
Right.
or re-victimize, or there was no evidence in support, corroborating evidence.
Right.
Just give an explanation. Don't let it sit out there and fester to the point where you and I, nominally two guys who don't wear tinfoil hats, actually tilt towards the tinfoil.
Well, there may be a reason why they didn't add those lines, because it may not be true. That there may be some that are that way and others that are not. Because if Jeffrey Epstein was what some people say, which is he wanted to hold things over people's heads because he loved that kind of power, then maybe some of that is there. And not necessarily.
Maybe that was utilized by people who do not want the sources and methods exposed as to how it's operating. And that's what I'm told is the best working theory of where we are today. But you and I are going to work the phones, and we'll be back on this subject, I guarantee you, because it's as you look how far away we are from JFK. And I can't tell you how many times, speaking of Cyril Wecht, I eulogized him at his funeral, and I spent hours with Cyril talking about JFK, and it was fascinating. And he had thought about it, and he was no conspiracy theorist himself. He was right down the middle.
There are some of the smartest people I know have been involved in this. Rob Reiner is all in on this, and as a specific theory. I mean, there's a lot of information about the CIA and Oswald and the fact that the CIA hated Kennedy because of what he was doing to them after the Bay of Pigs and all that. Okay, can you call a 617 number stat?
Who am I calling?
You know what 617 is, right?
Yeah.
Call Dershowitz.
Hold on. But except he doesn't live in 617 anymore.
Oh, are you doing this right now? Hold on, everybody.
See if he answers.
Okay,
And you're right. It is a 617 number. I wouldn't give it out, though.
Dramatic pause, everybody.
Why? I wish you had told me this an hour ago.
I didn't think of it until now. Is it just ringing?
Yeah. Hold on. Maybe somebody picked up. Alan? Mark Geragos. Hello? Yeah, I think it went to the voicemail.
Okay.
We may do a follow-up to this.
Oh,
Harvey.
God. If you get a phone call, I want to hear from you.
You got it.
Have a good weekend.
You too.
See ya.
Bye-bye.